Um, my name is Justin Smith. I'm the Ricoh Apps AE for Indy. I support all of Indiana for technical support. Your outside sales engineers are Mike Henry's on the call, Jeff Bernauer, who covers our Indy office. We also have 3 other engineers, Paul Wheeler out of Kentucky, Greg Bodis out of Cincinnati, who is our drive specialist, and Dave Henderson, who is our control specialist out of Kentucky as well. Today, we're going to cover the S7 1200 PLC. We're going to go through a little bit of a PowerPoint, and then I'm going to jump into some actual programming. Kind of walk you through some of the ins and outs of the 1200. This is a basic controller is what Siemens classifies this as, but basic can actually do a lot of things. This is a really well put together PLC, and we're going to go through some of that. Like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to jump in the chat or unmute to ask a question. Go ahead and share my screen here. All right. So some of you have seen the 1200 PLC before. This is our 1200 basic controller. If you've not used the 1200 or the 1500 PLCs for TIA Portal, definitely this will be a good kind of webinar for you. This is the kind of the new and improved PLC. This is where Siemens is going for the future with our TIA Portal software. Like I said, if you have not seen that, I would definitely get with one of us to get you a starter kit. These 1200 starter kits are very, very affordable, and you get a lot of stuff in there, and we'll kind of cover that as well. Let's go ahead and get started. So the 1200 compact controller, modular space-saving controller for small automation systems that require either simple or advanced functionality, logic, HMI, and networking. Like I said, this is our basic controller, but a lot of good features on this. This has onboard I/O that's already built into the PLC. That does expand with add-on cards that you can add on, but there is built-in I/O just on the PLC. And depending on the type of PLC that you purchase, you can add on more I/O as you go to a larger 1200 from our 1211s up to our 1218s. This is kind of an older slide, but this is kind of showing the system architecture. So with TI Portal, with the features that we have in our new software, everything is one architecture. So you're going to do your PLCs, your HMIs, your drives. This is all going to be done in the TIA Portal. So you're able to communicate back and forth over that single Profinet connection, and you can program all in the same project. This is a little overview of the hardware. So you have the integrated Ethernet on single signal or single port on the lower PLCs, starting with the 1215 and up. There is a dual port, same one NIC, but there's a dual port Profinet card. We have 3 specialty modules to the left. Those are going to be your communication cards. We can go up to 8 signal modules on the right of the PLC. The 1211, which is our starter PLC, it is non-expandable, but it does have built-in I/O. So these are really low-cost 1211 PLCs. They still have Profinet. They can still be networked, but they don't have any expanding I/O. That does limit the applications, but it does cut down on the cost. you are able to use the inputs and outputs on those and then still network those to a larger PLC. Like we've said before, and if you've been to any of our other SciPec trainings, you probably have seen the TIA portal. So we have a central navigation portal. What this allows you to do is program, like I said, all of your components into one project: controller, HMI, drive. So we have our IO config on the left. We have our logic. We have an HMI design, network, motion, PID tuning. Some of these are older pictures, but we still have the functionality in our new software. Step 7 Basic. Step 7 Basic is our starting software for TIA Portal. This allows you to program the WinCC basic panels as well as the S7 1200. So if you buy a copy of the Step 7 Basic and you have a 1200 and a basic panel, you can program a number of those. You can still use remote IO. You can still use a Siemens drive, like a G120. Those are still add-on networking devices. They can still be programmed with Step 7 Basic. Basic just limits you to the 1200 PLC and a basic panel, but you can add on licenses for other products. So here's a scale of the controller setups that we currently have. We have definitely added a lot more, so this may be slightly out of date, but overall gives you a basic concept. So the 1200 being a basic controller, standalone systems, wastewater treatment, car wash, elevator pump control, material handling, packaging. You'll probably have seen it in some of your plants or some of the sites that you have visited, but the popular AVGs that are pulling your parts around the plant, there are a few companies that actually will put an S7 1200 in those AVGs that is handling all that automation to drive around the plant to pick up and drop off products. All right, some innovations of the 1200. So you have a technology integrated. Actually, we are going to show that today in our slides or in the actual example. Security integrated. There's plenty of protections, write protection, security, passwords, safety. All that is built into the 1200. Engineering in the TI portal. Integrated system diagnosis. There is actually system diagnostics that is built into the 1200 that you do not have to program. It is actually comes built into the firmware of the PLC, and it will provide diagnostics without having to add an additional code. And that's actually built into both the 1200 and the 1500. And then design and handling. All right. It's just kind of a breakdown of some of the options that we have for the 1200. So you will see on the left side, we have a switch module, the CSM. That's just a four-port unmanaged switch that is in the 1200 kind of body. So if you need to put a switch out in your out in the panel, you can have it in the same form factor as the 1200. We have a power module. So that power module is the power supply for the 1200 for your DC setup. Communication modules. So we have multiple CPs, Profibus, OSI, your CP1243, which is your second IP card, as well as your RS232 485 cards. We have our CPUs, starting with our 1211. 1211 is a non-expandable single PLC, so that's going to be 8 in, 6 out. basic PLC, but that does have a low cost, and so it's easy to use that in multiple projects to keep your costs down. 1212 and 1214 are single port Ethernet ports. Those are expandable up to the 12 I/O cards. 1215 and 1217, those are the dual port PLCs. You do get more I/O that is on board, but the chipset is the same for all the 1200s. Signal modules, that's your traditional digital inputs and outputs, analog safety. These are all set up to be a fail-safe CPU, so you would have a 1214F. Yes, you can add communication modules on the left of a 1211. That is just not expandable for I/O. Technology modules. We do have add-on technology modules, Cywerx. So we actually have a weights and measurements add-on for the 1200. And then we also have signal boards. So the signal board goes into the middle kind of square that you see on that 1200. That can pop out, and you can add in a different signal board if necessary. So here's a breakdown of the communication modules: 232, 422, 485, Aussie Master, Profibus, multiple setups for our PLC. We do have a RFID communication card. So if you are reading RFID, the RF120C, we can do RFID in there, as well as the IO link on the right. Communication, so CPU hardware config, loading a project, monitoring runtime tags. This kind of breaks down the setup for our Profinet. The integrated web server, we'll cover this a little more later, but the PLC actually has an option in the configuration where you can activate a web server, and that will allow you to do online diagnostics, as well as monitoring tags, reading and writing different tags from the web server, all without having the software or an additional laptop. That can just be done on a simple web browser. And we also have a archive. There is a add-on blocks that are free from Siemens that allows you to use a data logger, where you can log data and save it to a CSV file on the SD card of the PLC, and then you are able to actually get in through the web server and download those CSV files for your data logging. All right, semantic memory card options. What can be saved: program data, system data, recipes, files, projects. You can store a lot. The sizes are on the left side. Typically, a 4 to 12 meg is pretty standard. If you are going to store larger files for your data logging, you may want to go to a larger memory card. And these are not traditional SD cards. These are a semantic memory card. They do have additional firmware that's written on those. They are a higher quality SD card, so 500,000 write access possible. And these are covered with a pretty long warranty from Siemens if you do have a card that does fail. Configuration control or option handling. These are, this is a really neat setup where you can actually, through your OB100 startup, if you are an OEM and you are designing a machine, you can actually add in specific I/O cards to the configuration, and then depending on what is getting sent out to the customer, you can configure what is going to be loaded in. So if a customer does want to add an I/O card, that is something that you can manipulate through the project. That just prevents any type of add-on additional cards being loaded into your machine that may not be set up the way that you want that machine to be configured. The SIMATIC memory cards, I did get the note. The SIMATIC memory cards are the same for the 1200 and the 1500. Those are both the newer. They will be black in color. The 300s and the 300 series are the teal colors, and those are not the same. But there is a 1200, and the SIMATIC HMI memory cards are also different. If you're going to load it and put a SD card into an HMI. We have a question on safety. So the I/O that is on the PLCs is not a safety. Those are not safety I/O. That is just traditional onboard I/O is non-safe. If you wanted a safety PLC, you can add that, but you will need to buy the safety input and the safety output cards that would be attached on the right side of the PLC. All right, so this is some highlights from version 4.2. We are actually now at 4.4. So you will see definitely different add-ons and different packages that are built into the firmwares. Updating the firmware is very simple. The firmwares are all posted on the Siemens support site. If you are not familiar with that, see me afterwards, because you definitely need to be registered for that. Lots of great information on that support site, but you are able to download the firmware and just via TI portal, you can upgrade the firmware to the newest for your PLCs. It's very simple to run. Version 4.4 just came out for our version 16 of TI portal. And one of the new features for the 4.4 is the S7-1200 can now be an OPC UA server. So as more and more of us are asked to gather data and put it online or put it in the cloud and do something with it, the question is always, how do I get it out? How do I get it up? And the 1500 and the 1200 can be OPC UA servers. The 1500, I believe, also can be a client. But the 1200 is strictly a server at this point. But that is an add-on, no cost. It's just built into the software. You just have to be in the 4.4 firmware. So this is showing you some of the features with our web server. And this is showing you for the 1500. But there are capabilities where you can do traces from the 1200, and you can view the traces. I know with the 1500, you do get more flexibility and more configuration options, but this is showing you that you can store traces in the PLC and monitor them on the web server. Backup and restore. So you can back up a project, recipe data. There's a full walkthrough on that, so if you need it, we can give that to you. Yes. Reduction of functionality of the user-defined web pages. That I am not sure. I will have to do a research of if you're going to have any limitations on the web pages between a 12 and a 15. I would say no, because it's a simple web server, but I will have to verify that. That's a good question. Time synchronization between the CPU and the communication cards. So we do have built-in functionality for the NTP servers. Media redundancy protocol. So this is a ring topology. So a lot of us are tasked to manage a machine that has no downtime or limited downtime. You are able to use a 1500 or 1200, and you can use these PLCs as a client on a ring. So this is kind of like a you've probably seen a lot more rings in rings between switches. This is going to be more of a device level ring, but you do have that functionality for the 1200 to be a client. You will still need a ring master, so that could be a managed switch, or a 1500 does have the ability to be an MRP master that can do the switching. I would still recommend having a good Scalence switch. We do have those available, and those are stocked in Ohio, as well as Siemens does stock all of their Scalence switches as well. And we have done a couple demos on that, but we're more than happy to show you some more to prevent that unnecessary downtime. S7 routing. So if you've not seen this before, we have a PLC and a drive and HMI all on a single subnet. And by adding a CP1243 card to the left, we are actually able to add a second IP address that is in the same IP as a engineering laptop. Engineering laptop needs to make changes to an HMI, so I can tunnel in through the CP card, which allows me to transfer the HMI project, even though I'm not on the same subnet. So you are able to make those changes through that CP card. And a lot of you have probably done that before. A lot of you are probably doing that now with either 1543s, 1243s, or our typical 343 card for our 300s. You'll add those to your rack, and that's where IT usually pulls their data for data analysis or different monitoring systems as you're getting pulled through. But you are able to actually push back down and make changes on a system as well. So some protection. I know we talked about security, so you can disable copying from the internal load memory to an external SD card. The 1200s have an internal memory, so you are not required to have an SD card. You can add an SD card and let the project run from the SD card, but there is an internal memory for the 1200. The 1500 is in the 300s. Those do need the SD cards to run. Those memory cards have to be in there. That's where the project is stored and ran from. But the 1200s does have internal memory that you can just download right to. So that does keep you from having to add a memory card. But you have protections on there, so nobody can try to pull that project off. You also have the ability to set up a SIMATIC memory card, is what we call a transfer card. If you need to load a new project into a PLC and you're not physically there, you can put your project on a SIMATIC memory card that is set up as what we call a transfer card. Your customer can put that into can power down their system, put the card in the PLC, turn it on, let it load, turn it off, and the project will actually automatically copy from the SD card and load into the internal memory of the PLC. That way your customer doesn't have to really do any changes. It's a simple maintenance task to transfer a new project into a PLC. It keeps the project safe from any unfortunate changes in the code. The SIMATIC automation tool. This is a really cool tool that we have here. that allows you to program. I can program updates. I can do firmware updates. I can set IP addresses. I can scan the network. This is a free. I say free. It was free. I think they've now started to charge for this via Siemens, but you're looking at maybe $200. Very, very low cost to what this will allow you to do. You can download to PLCs. You cannot do any programming, but if you have a PLC that is running and is connected up, you can take your project. You can download to the PLC. It will take the download and it will run, and it all is just done from this add-on software. You don't actually have to have a full-blown copy of TI Portal. Your customer could buy this. You could sell this to your customer and let them have it on an engineering laptop. And all you would do is have to send them a copy of a project. They would open it, select the PLC that they want to down to, and they can push that down. This is a really nice setup for checking, the putting the CPU into a run stop, scanning the network to make sure all your IP addresses are the same, or different changes. If a customer gets a new CPU, they can pull out their old one, put the new one in, and you can download with this software without any chances of messing up your pre-programmed project. I did get a note, or did get a question about internal memory for the CPU. I will have to double check that. It is listed in the S7 1200 manual of the quantity of that. I do not know off the top of my head what the internal memory limits are for the 1200. They may vary from PLC, but I'll dig that up in the manual for you. All right, so you had to go around and change the IP address on all of these CPU stations. Obviously, nobody wants to go through that and do it one at a time, or make the user go out there with a project. You can use the automation tool to update them all at once. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but in case you do, we have that capability. Like I said, this is they do offer a free version. It is limited. There's a paid version. Like I said, it's I'm going to say about $200, and that does have that full functionality that you can use to modify and configure PLCs without actually having to program. All right. So general mechanical engineering, special machines, apparatus engineering, packaging, production, AGVs, drilling, cutting, grinding. It's kind of just a overview of the basic 1200 controller. This will definitely give you a good idea of kind of where this is going to go. All right, starter kits. So these part numbers are definitely going to be an older version, but please get with your sales guy and your salesman and ask them for the newest list, or if you have a specific one that you're looking for. These starter kits are great. Now they are for starter kit testing only. These are not for download or buy these and put them into your machines. They are monitored of how many we're selling, but these are really, really low cost starter kits. The 1200 comes with the top one's just the 1200 with the Step 7 Basic. You also get a install disk, a license. You also have a printed circuit board with some toggle switches that you can test some code. From there, we also offer it with a 400 and a 700 basic panel. Once again, Step 7 Basic will program both the PLC and the basic panel. So you can get a 4-inch or a 7-inch HMI. I'm going to say these are $900 for the largest one, down to about 500. These are really, really inexpensive. I think the license for Portal itself is roughly $500. So you're getting a license and then getting PLCs and HMIs for practically free. This is our standard setup. We also offer a safety 1200. So you can get I believe it's a 1214F, and it does come with the safety input and output cards, and it also comes with a copy of Step 7 Safety Basic. That is allowing you to do ProfiSafe, or letting you do the fail-safe and ProfiSafe is safety over Profinet. So your drives, your Profinet push buttons, or Profinet e-stops, all that can be done just over your network or a ProfiSafe I/O rack. You have input and output cards that are remote. You can actually do safety over the Profinet. Top 5 selling points: 1, programming software, built-in hardware capabilities, price performance, global product. Pretty much a walkthrough of why the S7 1200 can really do a lot of stuff, and we're going to kind of get into that with some of the actual programming. And that is presentation. All right. So I've kind of answered most of these questions here. All right. So you are all muted. That is my presentation for the PowerPoint. I'm going to jump into TI Portal, but I'm going to take a minute here and give you guys an option if you have other questions and you want to chime in and ask away here. Give it a minute or so, and then we can move on. So if you want to ask a question, unmute and ask away.
Yeah, this is Mark Dobrinsky from Novellis, Terre Haute, Indiana.
Hey, Mark.
How you doing? Hey, what I'm interested in is that the unit that you just showed earlier, it would be good for training. And I'm interested in the one with the safety, because then we can set it up and use it for whatever we want for training.
Yes, so we will get you a quote on the 1200 F starter kits.
Yes. Thank you.
No problem. All right. All right. Going once, going twice. All right. We will jump into training here. All right. All right, here we go. All right, so I am going to start a new project real quick. And as we go through this, so I'm presenting the TI portal, but if you have other questions, like I said, please chime in and we will answer those for you. All right, so if you have started TI Portal, you've probably seen something like this. This is a typical setup that you'll have here. And once you've gone through that setup, you will go into our project view. So we're going to go ahead and start a project. So I'm going to add a device. And I'm looking for a 1200. And I'm going to do a feature here. So down at the bottom of your CPU setup, there's one called unspecified. So by selecting this, you'll see I kind of have like a ghost PLC. Okay. What this allows you to do is if you are connecting to a machine and say your machine has a lot of I/O. Now in a 1200, we do have a limited I/O that can be expanded. But if this is a 1500 and you had a really long rack that you needed to pull in some hardware, you can configure everything from the catalog and pick module by module. Or I can actually do a detect. What that's going to do is it's going to check my network to try to find the PLC that is currently out there. It found my PLC, and by able to do a detection, I not only bring in my PLC and its configurations, but I automatically will bring in the I/O that is on the right side of it or that is connected to it. So if I had some communication cards, those would automatically get pulled in. If I have I/O on the PLC, that gets pulled in. In this case, I have a CB 1241 on here. This is pulled in, but that automatically will detect it. It will know the configuration that I have set up. Now this will automatically default it back, to the IP address of the PLC that I have. But your configurations will still need to be set up. This isn't going to pull in all the configurations. It's just going to pull in what it sees, being this is a new project. All right. So some of the nice features of TI Portal in 1200, like we were saying, we have our cards to the right. So here's our hardware catalog. So those of you that are familiar with the SIMATIC Manager or S7300, your hardware configuration was always in a separate page. You always had to open that up and kind of run through. All this is going to be done in the same window with TI Portal. There is no second pop-up or another screen that you have to go to. It is done more with tabs, but it's all kind of built into the one window architecture. So on the far side, I have all of my communication modules. So I have my 1243 cards, depending on what type I need. Profibus, point-to-point, identification, OSI, all that is going to be built on the right side. In this case, I'm actually using a communication board, which is just a simple RS485 single configuration here. Instead of having the card on the right side or on the left side, I have it just built into the PLC with the communication board here. On the right, I have an SM1278. This is actually our IO-Link module. Here. So this is my IO-Link master. I actually have up to 4 channels for this IO-Link master that I can configure. So if you would right click and wanted to configure, you can start the device tool, and that will open up your port configuration tool where you can add on additional IO-Link modules. In this case, this is just using a PNF distance sensor running on IO-Link. If you have not seen it, Dave Henderson does a SciPec event that has done some with IO-Link for some of our controls products that are running on IO-Link, which is a really, really neat system that we have. We also have multiple IO-Link devices out there. All right, from here, I now have a PLC. If I wanted to add additional devices that are out there, this is just a single rack. If I wanted to pull in maybe an IO rack that is out there, I have the option to do hardware detection. And that's actually going to search my Profinet network. By clicking here, I can hit start search. I can find my remote IO rack. And if I go into my network settings, you can now see I've pulled in that IO rack. I can select the PLC here, or I can use the drag and drop. And I've now made my Profinet connection. And this is my new Profinet network. By going into the device view, you will see it not only brought in the head module, but all of the corresponding IO cards, as well as the correct firmware. This IO card may have multiple firmwares, and if you are adding this manually and you start going through by full-on part number, you may have a 1.0 or a 1.1, and you would need to actually select that in your hardware catalog as you go through. If you're picking the right one, you'll need to make sure that the IO version is what matches the card that you have. So with the hardware detection, I'm actually able to pull that in and add in that device. Same thing from the PLC. If I wanted to, I can also try to do a detection for an HMI. I can do maintenance on here. All that can be pulled in from that additional setup. I'll try to keep this brief because I want to get into some better setups for our project, but some of our neat features for the TI portal is if I wanted to drag and drop some code, I'm able to do this here. Call this a start, call this a stop, call this a run. I can add in additional blocks. If I pull this here. Now the neat feature with the TI portal is, obviously I don't want this on this side of the block. I can actually just grab this and redirect it and move this around. A lot of times you have to delete and kind of start over, but I'm able to drag and drop any of these icons wherever I need them, and it will automatically reformat. All right. So I have some undeclared inputs that I can now either right click and I can define my tag. I'm going to look at another option. I go into my PLC. Say you add an IO card to a project and you want to know that you've used all the IO that you have. I have the opportunity to float this PLC. And if I zoom in on my PLC, you should be able to see actually I have the inputs and outputs right here on the CPU. If I drag and drop these, I can actually start adding that there. I can actually assign run by going the opposite way. So instead of just adding the device, if I go back to my start, I drop this on here. Already done that one. I can actually label the input. So not only did I make that connection between a undefined tag, I've actually gone ahead and added in the input that it's under. So I have my eyes, I have my cues, but I now have tags. If I want to, I can rename this. I start. And I now have my IO directly on the card. Kind of a neat feature that we offer here with software. You can also see the IO in your properties. I go to IO tags. You'll also be able to see the IO listed for each module. And I can actually create my tag table here. And put 3. Now this will automatically create my PLC tag. And we can put it into the tag table. If I want to, I can actually add in a tag table on each card. So as I add a new tag table, I can reorganize my tags in the PLC. All right. So I'm going to run through, I'm going to actually open a different project, run through some features. So I'm going to give you a view of my setup here. All right, so you should be seeing this is a simple setup of my home rack. My apologies on the gnat's rest or the rat's nest of cabling. But here's my 1200. This is my CB card that I have my communications going to my V20 drive, which is on USS protocol. I have my toggle switches. I have a stepper motor right here. And then I have my 7-inch comfort panel HMI. This is where we're going to run through some of the projects that we have been working on here. And I'll come back to this in a moment. All right. So in my project here, I'll walk through some of the setups that we were reviewing. So one of the options that we have is called our technology objects. If you've never seen the technology objects of a PLC of the 1200, the technology objects is built into TI Portal for different tasks. In this case, we have a 1200, so I can do a positioning axis. I can also use it as a command table. I can do PID loops, so temperature, PID compact, 3-step. This is all built into the software. This is not an add-on. There's no additional cost for this. This is just built into TI Portal, and I can run my PID loops as well as my identification. So if you have a RFID reader, you are going to add in this technology object, and this will allow you to address each reader as their own technology object, and then each one comes with its own configuration. This is really, really neat. With the 1500, you do have a lot more capabilities: positioning, speed, synchronous access, camming, full motion control in a 1500. But for a 1200, if you wanted to do a positioning axis, you can do that with a servo, or in our case, we're using a stepper. So for the axis that we have here, so this is a 1200 with PTO, so pulse train outputs, that is actually built into the 1200 output setup. So I'm actually able to go in and configure the drive, configure my stepper for simple pulse direction. A lot of cases, we are definitely using more servos. And in our case, having a servo would be great. But if you're doing something small, if you're indexing something small, and you can, by adding in a servo setup, that cost and complexity definitely goes up. One that Ricoh can help with, but if it's something small that you don't really want to spend a ton, there are a lot of good stepper motors. Ricoh does have multiple vendors that can provide a good stepper motor and driver, but this allows you to do simple positioning just through your PLC using the pulse train outputs. The nice part about the technology object, I'm able to go through and do my commissioning here, set my mechanics, I can set my limits, e-stops, homing. All this is just built into the axis. From there, I can actually go into commissioning, and I'm actually able to test my setup. So I can activate the PLC, or I can activate my controls. I can enable my unit. And if I need to, I can now spin the drive. Let's see. Just to make sure, maybe I'm not sharing my screen. Sorry, I just saw the notification. Let me stop sharing.
Yeah, we see somebody else's screen.
Oh, let me get back into it. Sorry. Let's see. How's that? All right. My apologies.
There you go.
All right. So I will try to cap this real quick. Configuring of the drive. I'm not sure if you guys had seen that for technology. So in our technology objects, we can do positioning. I can do PID setups, as well as if you have RFID, you can actually add in each configuration block for each reader that you add. But this is a technology object that is built into the TI portal. There's no additional cost for that. In our case, I'm setting up a technology object for positioning using a stepper motor. I'm using pulse train outputs here. I have my drive set up, and then I'm able to run that drive here. By enabling this, I can now spin my axis. This is just all built into the technology object for testing. All right. That's our technology objects. I'll kind of get into more on that in just a second. Another feature that we have is going to be our drive control. So if you have a G120 or a S120, those are Profinet enabled drives. But if you have a V20, which is our basic value drive, this is a pretty simple, we refer to as a shaft turner, low cost drive. It does not have a Profinet card, so it is not something that you can network. But if you have either Modbus or USS protocol, this will communicate over a 4S85 setup. I will kind of go through that here in just a second. And one other option here is we're going to look at is the web server. We kind of talked about that earlier. So if I come to our web server of the PLC, I can actually activate my web server. I can enable who can see what, watch table, user defined pages, so you can actually make your own HTML page and write code for that. Multiple setups for our web server. All right. So we are going to set up real quick. Jump over here. All right, I'll try to make this not super jerky. Over here on my HMI, this is my SciPac HMI. I have my separate control. From this setup, I'm able to home the drive. I can enable the drive. And then if I want to, I can put in a move by I can activate my drive here. All right, so I have this set up on just a simple servo, and I can set up my positioning. I can do relative moves. All that's just built into this little $20 servo that I bought. And this is all built in. So you do have a very simple motion control built into the servo here. Let's switch back to my portal real quick. All right, so on my HMI, let's try to do a test here. So we had mentioned the web server, and if I wanted to, I can punch in the IP address of the PLC, and I can pull that up on a simple browser, and that is helpful if you have a laptop and you want to be able to make changes or do different runnings on there. Another really neat feature that we have. This is just a runtime advanced of the HMI that we're currently running, but I have the actual option to embed the web server into an HMI. So if you have an HMI that is out there, there is a web browser icon. So I'm actually able to log into my HMI from the HMI or log into my PLC from the HMI and do some diagnostics. So if I want to enter the 1200, you put this information in. This is something you can set up for maintenance person. There are different levels that you can use to log into your PLC. And some of the features that you have with this web server, you can get status on your PLC that is built in. So I know the project that it's running. I know what version of TI Portal is it was programmed in, station name, what type of PLC it is. This is a DC. I can see that what run. I can put it into a stop mode. I can run it, flash the LEDs. I have built-in setups on the far side for the diagnostic buffer. A lot of us out there, if you have maintenance where something starts to flash and you need to know what it is, a lot of times we have to call an engineer to get a laptop to go plug in, to open the project, to go online, to view the diagnostic buffer that says an IO card is unplugged. Sometimes that can be a lot of work. This is actually built into the web server where I can actually get the diagnostic buffer of the PLC and see different setups. Now in this case, I realize the graphics are not the best, but I'm able to go in and navigate the web server right from the HMI. I can get module information, tag status. So if you wanted to monitor some tags, and then there's also a watch table. That is something that I would recommend if you're going to use one of these. The watch table is really neat. You can set up read only. You can set up read and write. You can get more information. So module information allows me to kind of drill down to see different devices on my network. So if you had an IO card that was unplugged, you're going to see different settings here in the PLC about that status. So there's my IO card. All right. So you'll see here, it's identifying, it says it's green. So it shows that I have a good setup. And looks like I'm refreshing here. So now you'll see I have a red mark. I open this guy up. So my digital output card is showing an error. I just unplugged it. So as soon as I unplugged it, it catches that error. As I click that back in, you'll see my web browser automatically starts to refresh because that update has changed. So this isn't going to where a lot of times in the older PLCs, if you had a card error and you changed out the card, you'd have to do a reset or reload code to see if things changed. This is real time or as close as we can get to real time. I unplug it recognizes it, I plug it back in, and it goes back to a good status. So this is all built in, no additional software. It's just written into the setup. I want to go look at the watch table. So I can see I have my drive control here. If I wanted to make a change to my drive control, this is a read and write watch table. So I'm able to add in additional values. See here, I can write in the new value. I wanted to come down below and say I wanted to monitor a certain parameter on a drive. Put that value in. Tell it to go. This is all built into the web server. I did have to go in and tell it what capabilities I have for this watch table. But if you need to make changes, this is a really neat setup to kind of monitor your different setups. And then if I need to, I can log out. Or if I hit go back, it's going to automatically log me out there. From there, I have my control of my V20. I can reset my drive. I can give it a speed. By setting this up here, you can do the same thing. So here's my V20. It's running. And I'm running same thing on the HMI. This is all being done through that CP card. You can also use the card next to it, the CP 1241. This is the card that I have, and it will run on this. Once again, you can actually daisy chain, I believe, up to, I want to say 40. Maybe it's 20. You can do up to 20 drives on USS, and you can actually daisy chain your VFDs to run on a USS. So V20s, like I said, low cost. Most of the time they're just run via inputs that are built in onto there. But if you are looking for some speed control, that is built in there. A pretty simple setup for our 1200 to handle.